You will absolutely never catch me starting a client as low as possible when beginning a caloric deficit. Hi, I'm Kelsey Nanini, certified strength and conditioning specialist and certified nutrition coach. I'm here to help you go from frequent gym goer to strong, confident, educated athlete. And today I'm here to do just that by talking through exactly how to start a client of yours or even yourself in a caloric deficit if you want to make progress that actually sticks and not go through a caloric deficit that absolutely sucks the life out of you and feels impossible to stick to. First off, I want to talk about who a caloric deficit is right for and the reason to be in a deficit. In my experience as an online health and fitness coach, I find that so many people jump straight into a deficit or bounce around from deficit to maintenance far too quickly. They go to maintenance for 3 months and they jump right back into another deficit. That is not a big enough break. And frankly, your body wants to be at maintenance. Your body loves homeostasis. Does that mean you can never cut or never bulk? Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, your body wants to be at homeostasis, and spending as much possible time at maintenance is what is going to allow for your body to thrive long term, to build muscle, to perform well, to move pain-free, to have energy throughout the day, reduce brain fog, all of the things that essentially deem us healthy and able. So who is a deficit right for? First would be somebody who has spent lengthy time at maintenance. I recommend minimum 6 months, but ideally a year or more. Allow your body time to reset, to get hormones in a good spot, to get metabolism functioning well, to allow for performance to do its thing, to get stronger and build muscle. So many good things can happen at maintenance that I strongly urge people to not rush the process of getting right back into a caloric deficit. Also, if you are somebody who just wants to be back in a deficit, 1, you're crazy. And 2, I don't think you've spent ample time at maintenance to realize how much more you can thrive at that point. Now again, more people who a deficit is good for is someone who has a good relationship with food. They don't deem foods as good or bad, and they understand that all foods have a place in our diet at any given time. Someone who has also proven that they can be consistent at maintenance. If you can't be consistent at your maintenance calories, which are obviously higher than they are in a deficit, there's no way you're going to be consistent while in a deficit. If you give yourself time to get accustomed to maintenance, you'll realize it is the easiest phase that you will ever go through, and you'll actually want to be there longer term. And lastly, you're someone who has fairly low stress levels. I recognize that everybody has stress, and acute stressors are totally fine. In fact, your body is able to actually manage and handle acute stressors, but what it can't handle is chronic stress, and that can definitely begin to weigh on your overall health. I strongly urge anyone who has chronic stress that's very, very high at most times of the day and or week to not be in a caloric deficit and to really just focus on being at homeostasis and giving your body the fuel that it needs. Now that we've talked about that, let's talk about average time frame for a deficit. So there's a few different time frames depending on the person, depending on the goals, depending on experience. First is a shorter deficit. That's about 6 to 8 weeks. This is probably for somebody who doesn't necessarily have a ton of body fat to lose. They more so have been, at maintenance or maybe even bulking for quite some time, and they just want a short little deficit, lose a little bit of body fat, lean out just a touch to feel a little bit more confident in their body. On average, I would say, at least for my clients specifically, we do about 12 to 16 week deficits. This gives you ample time to lose some body fat, but it's not an extended period of time to where your performance may start to diminish, your strength may start to diminish. It's a good period of time where you can lose some body fat and get out of it and back to maintenance to continue thriving there. And the last is a long deficit. This would be 6 months, sometimes more if you have more body fat to lose and your body is still making progress after that 6-month mark. With this option, I strongly urge scheduling in some diet breaks. So a week long where you're increasing calories a little bit, give yourself a little break from the monotony of a deficit. Maybe this is when you have a vacation or a short weekend trip where leading up to it, you have a little bit more flexibility. It could just be some random week thrown in to give you a little break. Maybe you've experienced really low energy levels and you're not quite ready to be done with the deficit. You still have some work to do. We can do a diet break, get you some more calories, maybe drop down energy expenditure a little bit, so reducing cardio. Again, give your neuromuscular system, give your mentality, give it all a little bit of a break to then push forward towards the end of the cut. Now that we've gone through some background of what exactly a deficit can look like, who it is good for, let's talk about how to start a caloric deficit. The first option is a small decrease. This is anywhere from a 5 to a 15% decrease. This is going to be an optimal option for someone that's going into a lengthier deficit. You're still going to start them off with a little bit of a decrease in food. It's not going to be anything crazy, especially since you have a long-term deficit ahead of you. I highly urge you to start with this option, again, for the lengthier cuts, so that someone doesn't feel miserable at the start of a cut. There is a mental aspect to it. If somebody loses 5 pounds in the first week of a deficit because you decreased by 20% in a 6-month deficit, awesome. But what is their body gonna do later down the road? The other part of it is that first week, and probably even couple of weeks, they're gonna be extremely lethargic, extremely fatigued, not able to perform like they would like to in their workouts, and they may lose steam. In a 6-month or maybe more deficit, you're in it for the long haul. You want them to have a place that they feel that they could maintain forever if they wanted to. Again, you're playing the long game with a 6-month cut, and your client should understand that progress may come a little slower, but if they're losing a half a pound to a pound a week throughout those 6 months, they could be losing up to 24, 25 pounds, which is awesome in 6 months. And it's also something that they can sustain long term. Another reason for a small deficit would be for someone who's actually going into their first dedicated cut. Maybe in the past they've been in caloric deficits but not really realized it, and now they're finally in a timeline for their deficit and they're a little bit nervous, they don't know what to expect, a cut is very new to them. Starting off slowly is going to be something that will allow for them to ease into things and progress as they go. On average, even my clients who are in 12 to 16 week cuts, we typically start them with a small decrease. My typical decrease for most clients is about 10% of a decrease. Let's say somebody's at 2,300 calories, they're maybe just above maintenance, that would be decreasing 230 calories off the bat. It's less than they've been eating, and their body typically responds pretty well with that initial drop in food. The next option for decreasing is a moderate decrease, about 15 to a 30% decrease. Now, this is a lot of food. If a client is at maintenance, and let's say their maintenance is 2,100 calories, this is decreasing by anywhere from 315 to 630 calories right off the bat. And if someone's already at 2,100 calories, they could be eating as low as 1,500 calories right off the bat in a deficit. So I don't recommend this for someone who's at maintenance. So decreasing 600 calories is also going to leave your client starving. For my clients, we keep performance and strength top of mind. I never want a deficit to take precedence over how they feel in the gym. So I always make sure that slow and steady decreases are happening. Now, that's just for my specific clientele and what I believe in coaching. You decide what works best for you. All I'm saying is I wouldn't want to decrease 600 calories off the bat. However, there is a time and place for a moderate and even an aggressive change. An aggressive decrease would be about a 30% decrease off the bat. For moderate and aggressive decreases, I think these are great for those who have been in a larger bulk and they're ready to work into a deficit. Let's say you have a client who has been bulking, they've been really wanting to gain strength in the gym, which requires them to lift heavy and have the energy to do so. Maybe they also run on the side and their energy expenditure is very high, meaning they need to eat to keep up with said energy expenditure. So let's say that they're at 3,000 calories. If we're going aggressive, their initial decrease would be by 900 calories. Now, it's important to remember they're going to be very hungry in the beginning of this deficit, but we're bringing them down to 2,100 calories, which may be roughly at their maintenance, maybe just below their maintenance, to get a strong start to the deficit. Another reason for a moderate or an aggressive decrease would be if your client is doing a very short cut and we just want to see some great results in that 6 to 8 week mark. whatever initial decrease you do, I think it's very important to remember average weight loss per week. A lot of clients may come to you with unrealistic expectations. They want to lose 2-3 pounds per week. In reality, that's not typically super sustainable. In my opinion, I want sustainability as much as possible for clients. I don't want to put them into a meaningless deficit where they just bounce right back to where they were before after the deficit is over. I always remind clients that a 0.5 pound to a pound loss per week is average weight loss, and that is what they should strive for. Some weeks, they may lose 2 or 3 pounds. Some weeks, they may not lose anything, but as long as we're averaging out to that 0.5 pound to a pound a week, I believe they're in a very strong spot. So as mentioned, the reason I never start a client off at the lowest intake possible, if I'm never gonna decrease someone right down to their BMR. I wanna decrease by just enough to elicit a response, meaning we're decreasing by just enough for them to lose some weight or body fat is what really the goal is in a deficit. My goal within a deficit for every single client is to have them eat as much as possible while still eliciting weight loss. 0.5 pound to a pound a week. By pushing for 0.5 pound to a pound a week, we're also keeping in mind that our goal in a deficit is to lose body fat. When somebody loses 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds in a week, it's not that they lost that in body fat. It's typically water retention. So I always remind clients of that, to not really get super excited about a ton of weight loss and place a bunch of focus on it. If anything, I try to place focus on how they're feeling, how they're performing, how their clothes are fitting, their energy levels, all of those kinds of things that don't have to do specifically with the scale. The scale is simply data, and we try not to place an emphasis on it. So again, I only decrease initially by what is needed to elicit a response. That also ensures they have energy to train. They still are sleeping well. They have energy throughout the day, and they're not experiencing brain fog. And when they stop seeing results, when the scale starts to stall, when they're not seeing a ton of progress in their physique, we have somewhere to decrease. Whereas if you start someone just above their BMR or at their BMR, you go as low as possible in a deficit right off the bat, you have nowhere to go when they stop seeing results. So when a client sees that stall, I typically say if we see a stall for a week or 2, that's when we can start to decrease. I typically wait for that 2-week mark of seeing a stall. From there, we can either drop food or increase energy expenditure, AKA increase cardio. So what I typically do from that point is decrease calories by 100 to 150 calories, typically between carbs and fats, or increase cardio, say adding an extra 30-minute session on. I typically like to make slow increases within cardio just to make sure the client's joints are in a good place and we aren't seeing too many diminishing returns from lifting by increasing cardio by a ton. Now, I'm not saying that cardio directly impacts muscle gain or muscle maintenance, because in reality, if you're eating enough to maintain both, you should be in a good place. That is what my goal is within a deficit, is to keep food in a good spot and cardio in a good spot to where we aren't seeing diminishing muscle. Which brings me to another point. The goal in a deficit is to maintain a client's muscle mass. I don't want my client losing a ton of muscle, which is why I don't decrease food a ton right off the bat. And I don't like to bring food super duper low. That wraps up my philosophy on cutting, why I don't like dropping clients' food down as much as possible right off the bat, and like to make slow and steady decreases. Slow and steady wins the race. The hare did not win the race, the tortoise did. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a little thumbs up so I know that it was helpful. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more helpful content, and I will see you in the next one.